A midnight siren split the darkness over Maple Glen. A burning car, a chained K9, and Detective Ethan Carter sprinting straight into the flames. He thought he was saving a stranger, but the battered German shepherd he pulled from the fire? That dog carried the secret to a missing partner, a city's corruption, and a chance at redemption neither of them believed they deserved. Tonight, this story might break your heart, but it'll show you just how far loyalty and courage can go when the world wants you silent. And before we dive in, where are you watching from? Share your city or country in the comments, and hit like and subscribe if you believe one act of bravery can change everything. The midnight sky over Maple Glen, Ohio, was split open by the wail of sirens. Streetlights flickered as Detective Ethan Carter's unmarked Dodge Charger tore down the cracked asphalt, his knuckles white around the steering wheel. Dispatch chatter hissed through the radio, but Ethan's focus was unshakable. An industrial fire at the old Walden lot, the kind of place where nobody belonged after dark. He slammed the brakes as orange flames danced against a black sky, licking hungrily at metal skeletons and broken chain-link fences. The scent of burning rubber and gasoline slapped him in the face as he jumped out, running low across the lot. Firefighters hadn't arrived yet. Someone had called it in, but the dispatcher sounded almost surprised, like she couldn't believe anyone would bother torching this forgotten corner of the city. As Ethan crept closer, he spotted it. A battered sedan engulfed in flames, windows fogged with heat. Through the haze, a frantic movement caught his eye. Someone, was trapped inside. For a split second, Ethan's mind flickered back years to another fire, another scream, and his brother's face disappearing behind a wall of smoke. He shook it off, adrenaline surging as he raced toward the car. A panicked bark exploded from inside the vehicle, cutting through the roar of the fire. Ethan's heart hammered. A dog, a big one by the look of its silhouette, threw itself at the rear window, teeth bared, eyes wild with terror. Heavy chain links gleamed, binding the animal's neck to the headrest. Fury and dread collided in Ethan's chest. Who the hell would chain a dog in a burning car? He grabbed a tire iron from the trunk of a nearby junker and smashed the window in one brutal swing. Shards of glass rained over his arm as heat blasted his face. The dog recoiled, then lunged forward, ears pinned back, fur slick with sweat and soot. Ethan coughed, his eyes streaming, but he reached through the broken window, fingers fumbling with the burning hot chain. The dog snapped, more out of panic than aggression, but Ethan didn't flinch. He yanked at the lock. Damn thing wouldn't budge. Flames flared, crawling across the car's roof. Ethan shouted, half to the dog, half to himself. He wrapped his jacket around his hand and twisted, wrenching the padlock until something inside snapped. The chain fell away. The dog, massive, all muscle and tangled fur, shot forward, collapsing into Ethan's arms. He staggered back just as the car's gas tank let out a deep, guttural groan. "Run!" he gasped, dragging the dog with him. They stumbled away, boots scraping on gravel, as the car erupted in a deafening blast. The shockwave knocked Ethan to his knees, sparks raining down like hellish confetti. The dog whimpered, pressing close to Ethan's side, shaking uncontrollably. For a moment, all Ethan could hear was the rush of blood in his ears. He looked down, meeting the animal's gaze, intelligent, pleading, wild with fear. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. A heavy collar hung around the dog's neck, battered and scorched, but the tag still gleamed. K9 unit, Ranger. Ethan's mind raced. Ranger, that name. The news had been all over the precinct. A K-9 officer missing for weeks after Detective Olivia Hayes, his partner, vanished in the middle of a trafficking investigation. Some had whispered she'd run off. Others thought she was dead. No one believed Ranger would just abandon her. Now here he was, nearly killed in a blaze. Ethan cradled the dog's head. "It's okay. You're safe now. I've got you." But as he tried to stand, he realized the dog's body was trembling, not just from fear, but from pain. Cuts marred his side, and one paw dragged awkwardly. Ranger stared up at Ethan, searching his face for something. Comfort, maybe, or hope. Ethan swallowed hard, fighting down the guilt that gnawed at him. He couldn't save his brother, but maybe he could save this dog. He fumbled for his phone, calling the emergency vet. "This is Detective Carter. I've got a K-9 officer, critical condition, burned and chained in a car fire. I need help now." His voice shook with more than urgency. The dispatcher recognized his tone. She'd heard it before, back when tragedy was something new, not routine. As Ethan waited, he knelt beside Ranger, murmuring soft reassurances he barely believed himself. Sirens grew louder, the first hint of help slicing through the chaos. Around them, the fire continued its hungry rampage, illuminating Ethan's face, set, determined, haunted. He looked down again, noticing a small badge woven into Ranger's collar. Olivia Hayes. The name hit him like a punch to the chest. She'd trained in this very precinct. She'd trusted the system, maybe too much. Now her partner was nearly killed, and she was still missing. Ethan stroked Ranger's head, feeling the dog relax just slightly under his touch. "I promise you, buddy, I'm not walking away from this. Not you, not her, not again." Somewhere behind the flames, memories threatened to consume him, but Ethan set his jaw. This time, he wouldn't let the fire win. The fluorescent lights of Maple Glen Veterinary Clinic flickered as Detective Ethan Carter burst through the doors, cradling the injured German Shepherd in his arms. Blood stained his jacket, mingling with ash and sweat. Dr. Grace Holloway, the only vet in town brave enough to work the night shift, snapped to attention. "Back here! Exam room 2!" she called, her voice calm but urgent. Ethan laid Ranger gently on the stainless steel table, his own hands shaking now that the adrenaline was wearing off. The dog's chest rose and fell in ragged breaths, dark eyes darting between the unfamiliar faces crowding around him. A tech approached with scissors, but Ranger let out a warning growl, low and fierce. "Easy, buddy," Ethan murmured, stepping into Ranger's line of sight. "You're safe here. I promise." He could see the doubt in the animal's eyes, the residual terror clinging to every muscle. Grace moved slowly, letting Ranger sniff her glove before touching him. While she worked, trimming singed fur, cleaning wounds, starting an IV, Ethan's mind raced. Why had someone tried to kill a K-9 officer? Why chain him in a burning car? Where was Olivia Hayes? His phone buzzed. Police Chief Marcus Leary. Ethan's gut twisted. He ducked outside, answering quietly. "Carter," Leary's gravelly voice came through. "Stand down on that fire. Let the arson team handle it. And keep that dog out of sight. You hear me?" Ethan stiffened. "Sir, Ranger is evidence. He's also the only witness to whatever happened tonight. He's coming with me until we figure this out." A beat of silence. "Just do what I said, Carter. No need for heroics." The call ended abruptly. Ethan stared at his phone, suspicion coiling tight. Why was Leary so quick to hush this up? Back inside, Ranger's growl deepened as 2 uniformed officers stepped into the exam room. Ethan's gaze sharpened, watching the dog's body language. The shepherd shrank away from Officer Quinn, who barely hid his distaste. then snapped his head to glare at Officer Bright, hackles up. "That dog needs to be sedated," Quinn muttered. Grace shook her head. "He's a police officer, same as you. He gets treated with respect here." She glanced at Ethan, nodding for him to stay close. Ethan crouched beside the table, his tone gentle. "Hey, Ranger, you're not alone. Not anymore." He let his hand rest near the dog's paw, feeling the trembling slow, just a little. The two officers exchanged uneasy glances and left, muttering about paperwork. Grace frowned, her hands never pausing. "Some of your colleagues seem a little too interested in shutting this down," she said quietly. Ethan kept his eyes on Ranger. "Something's not right. Leary told me to keep quiet. Why?" Grace finished bandaging a nasty burn. "You said this was Detective Hayes' partner? The one who went missing?" He nodded. "Olivia. She vanished 3 weeks ago, right in the middle of a trafficking case. Everybody thinks she ran, or worse. But Ranger, he'd never leave her unless something bad happened." Grace's brow furrowed. "There's something else." She examined Ranger's collar, fingers tracing the battered leather. Embedded in the stitching, nearly invisible, was a tiny black box. She pried it loose and held it up, a GPS tracker, blinking faintly. "Is this standard?" she asked. Ethan shook his head. "No. And if it was entered into evidence, I'd know. This was hidden." They exchanged a look, the room charged with new urgency. Grace slipped the tracker into a specimen bag. "Let's see where this leads. I know a tech at the university who can pull the data without alerting anyone." Ethan smiled, tension easing just a little. "Grace, you're a lifesaver." She shrugged. "I like dogs better than most people. Now, Ranger's stable for now, but he needs rest. You both do." Ethan nodded, exhaustion dragging at his bones. He glanced at Ranger, who was watching him, head tilted, as if weighing Ethan's trustworthiness. As Ethan sat in the corner, head in his hands, the events of the night replayed in fragments. The fire, the smell of burning flesh, Leary's warning, Ranger's terror. Ethan realized, deep in his gut, that someone inside the department didn't want this case solved. He made a silent promise, one he'd broken before, but wouldn't again. "I won't abandon you. Or Olivia. Not this time." Hours later, as dawn's pale light seeped through the blinds, Ethan awoke to find Ranger standing beside him, tail thumping gently against the wall. For the first time, the shepherd let Ethan scratch behind his ears. A bond, tentative and fragile, was forming between two survivors. Grace entered, a steaming mug in hand. "Coffee for the hero and his sidekick." Ethan managed a weak grin. "I'll take 'em both black." She handed him the mug, then knelt to check Ranger's bandages. "He'll heal, but the trauma, physical and emotional, will take time." Ethan nodded. "So will mine." Before leaving, Grace handed Ethan a copy of Ranger's records, as well as the bagged tracker. "Be careful. Whoever did this to Ranger isn't finished." As Ethan led Ranger out into the chilly morning, every shadow seemed longer, every glance over his shoulder sharper. He could feel the weight of the case settling on him like a second skin. On the drive home, Ranger pressed close to Ethan's side, panting softly. Ethan spoke quietly, more to himself than the dog. "I promise I won't let them bury this." Behind them, inside the empty clinic, Grace watched from the window, her face tight with worry. In the pale light, the story of a missing detective and her loyal partner was just beginning to unravel, and Maple Glen, with all its secrets, would never be the same. Ethan's house was dark and silent. the kind of quiet that gnawed at the edges of his nerves. He carried Ranger inside, gently setting him down on a thick old blanket by the couch. The dog's body trembled, paws twitching every few seconds, his gaze darting around the unfamiliar living room. The scents, coffee, cedar, faint aftershave, were all foreign to him. The only thing familiar was the ache of exhaustion in his bones and the wary, heavy sadness in Ethan's eyes. Ethan locked the door, double-checking the deadbolt, a habit from too many nights on the job. He exhaled slowly, the adrenaline finally ebbing away. The silence felt suffocating after all the chaos of the night. He watched Ranger for a moment, then crouched beside him, rubbing the fur behind his ears. "This is home for now, okay? You're safe here." Ranger's ears twitched, but he didn't move away. His body was tense, every muscle coiled tight. Ethan recognized the look, the same one he'd seen in the mirror after his brother's funeral, and again after Olivia disappeared. The look of someone barely holding it together. Ethan's phone buzzed with a barrage of texts, some from curious co-workers, others from numbers he didn't recognize. All said the same thing: "Let it go. Don't make trouble, Carter. Not worth it." He turned the phone face down, heart thudding with anxiety. He could feel the walls closing in. He fetched a bowl of water, setting it in front of Ranger. The dog eyed him suspiciously, then lapped at the water in short, nervous bursts. "That's it. Easy." Ethan tried to smile, but it felt brittle. He dropped onto the couch, boots thudding against the hardwood, and let his head fall back. Nightmares came quickly. In his sleep, he saw flames licking through his childhood home, his brother calling for help. He saw Olivia's face, worried, determined, fading into darkness. And through it all, a dog's frantic barking echoed, growing fainter, farther away. Ethan jerked awake, sweat slick on his neck, heart racing. Across the room, Ranger whimpered in his sleep, legs paddling, eyes squeezed tight. Ethan knelt beside him, hand hovering over the dog's shaking body. "Hey, you're safe. It's okay." Ranger woke with a start, teeth bared, body pressed low to the ground. For a long moment, man and dog stared at each other, both breathing hard, trapped in the grip of old ghosts. Finally, Ranger eased back, laying his head on his paws with a heavy sigh. The house creaked, settling in the early hours. Ethan made a pot of coffee, the bitter aroma filling the air. He poured 2 mugs, one for himself, one left on the counter for no one. Old habits. He carried his mug to the floor and sat across from Ranger. "You ever lose someone, Ranger?" Ethan asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Someone you were supposed to protect?" The words tasted bitter, but the dog listened, tilting his head. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, staring at the worn rug. "I thought I had everything figured out, but the world keeps finding new ways to break you, doesn't it?" He looked up, half expecting the dog to walk away. But Ranger inched closer, resting his nose against Ethan's knee. The contact, simple and warm, loosened something inside Ethan he hadn't realized was knotted tight. Morning light crept through the curtains, spilling gold across the floor. Ranger stretched, wincing as his bandaged leg brushed the blanket. Ethan watched as the shepherd limped to the window and peered out, nose twitching at the fresh air. A small, hopeful sound escaped his throat, almost a sigh. Ethan showered quickly, changing into clean clothes. He checked the doors and windows again, scanning the street for any sign of trouble. There was none. Only the paperboy pedaling past, a neighbor walking a golden retriever. The world moving on, as if nothing had happened. It felt surreal, He found an old leash in the closet, still dusty from years ago, and clipped it to Ranger's collar. "Let's get some fresh air," he said, more for himself than the dog. They walked slowly, Ethan guiding Ranger down the quiet sidewalk. The dog's steps were uncertain at first, but soon he began sniffing at fence posts and trees, his curiosity outweighing his fear. Neighbors glanced up, some offering polite nods, others giving Ethan a wary look. Word of the fire had already spread. In Maple Glen, news traveled fast. Halfway around the block, Ranger froze, his gaze locking onto a police cruiser parked outside a small grocery store. The dog's ears flattened, body trembling. Ethan felt a chill crawl down his spine. "It's okay," he murmured, kneeling beside Ranger. "You're with me." He waited until the cruiser pulled away, then coaxed Ranger home. Back inside, Ethan fed him bits of chicken from the fridge. Something easy, something that wouldn't hurt his stomach. Ranger ate slowly, tail wagging just a little. Later, Ethan sprawled on the couch, notebook in hand. He scribbled down everything he remembered from the fire, from Olivia's last case, from the odd behavior of Chief Leary and the other officers. He drew lines, circled names, searching for connections. Ranger watched him, settling beside the couch with a sigh. Every now and then, he'd nudge Ethan's hand, seeking reassurance or maybe offering it. When Ethan's phone chimed with another message, this one more threatening than the last, he pressed his back against the wall, anger and fear warring inside him. As night fell, Ethan dimmed the lights and turned on an old radio, the soft crackle of blues filling the space. He sat on the floor, legs crossed, Ranger at his side. In the half-light, the room felt less empty. He reached out, scratching Ranger behind the ears. "I don't know where this ends," Ethan whispered, "but I'm not giving up. Not on you. Not on her." For the first time, Ranger leaned against him, heavy and warm, a small, precious victory. In the quiet, with the weight of grief and hope pressing between them, man and dog began to build a fragile trust. Two survivors, not yet whole, but together. Ethan sat at his kitchen table, files and old case folders spread around him like a chaotic fortress. Ranger lay curled at his feet, ears flicking at every creak of the house. The morning sun was barely up, but sleep felt impossible. Ethan's mind wouldn't stop circling the same questions. How did Ranger end up in that burning car? And where was Olivia? The knock at the door startled both man and dog. Ranger barked, a sharp warning, before Ethan shushed him and peeked through the peephole. Dr. Grace Holloway stood outside, clutching a canvas tote bag and looking like she hadn't slept either. "I figured you'd be up," she said as Ethan let her in. "Didn't want to risk texting? Too many eyes on us right now." She placed her bag on the table and pulled out a battered laptop, a USB stick, and the small bagged GPS tracker. "I got the data. My tech friend at the university is a wizard. He cracked it last night." Ethan's pulse quickened. "And?" Grace opened her laptop, plugging in the USB. She turned the screen toward Ethan. "It's a breadcrumb trail, dozens of GPS pings over the last month. Look." A digital map flickered to life, little red dots forming a ragged path across Maple Glen and outlying farmland. Several clustered at the edge of town, but one location kept repeating. An old church, long abandoned, on the outskirts. Ethan leaned in. Olivia must have been investigating these places, and Ranger, his nightmares, his panic, they're not random, are they? They match the tracker's locations. Grace nodded. "I think so. Dogs remember more than we give them credit for. Smells, sounds, trauma. He's showing signs of PTSD, just like you, Ethan." The words stung. Ethan shifted in his chair, watching Ranger gnaw absently at an old chew toy. I can't believe how much this case has eaten at me. I used to think I could handle anything. Grace reached for a folder, pulling out Olivia Hayes' personnel file and her last case report. Maybe we'll find something she missed, or something she wanted us to find. They spent hours combing through files, incident reports, interview notes, photos. The story started to come together. Olivia had suspected a trafficking ring using Maple Glen's abandoned properties as safe houses and drop points. She'd gotten close, too close, and then vanished. The last entry in her notebook was a single word: sanctuary. Ethan tapped the map. That church. She called it sanctuary in her notes. Maybe it was more than just a hiding place. Maybe it was a base. Ranger paced the kitchen, agitated. When Ethan touched the map, Ranger whined and nosed at the edge of the table, tail stiff. Ethan's heart pounded. He knows something. He remembers. Grace stood and grabbed her coat. Let's check it out. We can bring Ranger. See if he reacts when we get close. The drive out of town was tense. The church loomed in the distance, its steeple skewed and its windows boarded over, the paint peeling like old skin. The morning air was sharp, every sound amplified in the silence. Ethan parked far enough away that no one would see them arrive. Ranger leapt out, nose to the ground, his posture alert. As they approached, the air grew colder. Ranger hesitated at the gate, hackles up, emitting a low, anxious growl. Ethan crouched beside him, hand on the dog's back, trying to steady both their nerves. Just like old times, huh? Ethan murmured. Grace nodded, her eyes scanning the churchyard for any sign of movement. Inside, dust motes danced in shafts of gray light. Old hymnals littered the pews, and graffiti marred the once beautiful altar. Ranger sniffed the air, muscles tight, and led them to a back room where the scent of mildew and something metallic lingered. Ethan pulled out his phone, opening the map. The tracker pinged here, again and again. Olivia must have spent time in this room. He sifted through a pile of discarded papers, finding a torn notebook. Pages were missing, but one scrap remained, smudged and wrinkled. It was a list of initials, likely code names, and a series of dates, all leading up to the day Olivia vanished. Grace scanned the scrap. These aren't just random notes. She was tracking someone, maybe someone close. Ranger whined, nudging Ethan's hand. His entire body shook, but he didn't run. Instead, he planted himself by Ethan's side and looked up, eyes shining with something that looked a lot like hope. Ethan felt the old wall around his heart crack just a little. He sat in a dusty pew, burying his face in his hands. The weight of grief, fear, and guilt pressed down. I should have seen this coming. I should have helped her. I let everyone down. Olivia, my brother, this town. Ranger climbed onto the pew beside him, resting his head on Ethan's lap. Grace stood back, giving them space, understanding that sometimes healing began in silence. For a while they sat in that ruined church, 3 survivors sharing a moment of pain and hope. The ghosts of the past lingered, but so did the possibility of justice. As they left, Ethan felt a new resolve harden inside him. We're not giving up, he said, voice stronger. We follow the trail, whatever it takes. Grace nodded, glancing at Ranger. He's with you, Ethan. So am I. Together they stepped back into the sunlight, ready to chase the shadows, following a trail only Ranger truly understood. Night fell over Maple Glen with a heavy, oppressive quiet, the kind that seemed to press down on Ethan's shoulders as he pulled his car into the shadows just off the old county road. The abandoned church loomed ahead, its paint blistered and peeling in the moonlight. The windows nothing but black holes staring out into the night. Ethan cut the engine, letting the silence settle, broken only by Ranger's restless breathing from the back seat. Grace checked her phone, the blue glow casting long shadows across her face. "No new activity on the tracker for the last 48 hours, she whispered, though she still glanced nervously out the window. "But the signal's definitely here. Someone's been using this place." Ethan nodded, eyes fixed on the church. "We wait. If they come back, we need to see who it is." They sat in the gloom, nerves wound tight. Ranger lay across the back seat, ears pricked, body tense with anticipation. Ethan absently scratched behind the dog's ear, finding comfort in the steadiness of his presence. He felt Grace's tension beside him, her breaths shallow, hands clutching her thermos like a lifeline. Minutes crawled by. The churchyard was a patchwork of tangled weeds and gravestones sinking into the earth. The only sound was the distant buzz of a streetlight and the steady ticking of the dashboard clock. Just as Ethan's eyelids began to droop, Ranger sat bolt upright, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Ethan followed the dog's gaze, a pair of headlights bobbing down the gravel road. The vehicle stopped behind the church, engine idling for a moment before cutting off. 3 figures emerged, all in dark, hooded jackets. One moved with the clipped precision of law enforcement. The others hung back, scanning the shadows. Grace's hand found Ethan's. "This is it." They watched as the trio slipped inside through a side door. Ethan considered calling for backup, but the threat from Chief Leary rang in his ears. "Don't trust anyone." He drew his service pistol, checking the safety, then slipped out of the car with Grace and Ranger following. They crept to the church's side wall, peering through a shattered window. The figures were clustered near the altar, their voices barely audible. Ranger pressed close to the wall, hackles up, nose quivering as he caught a scent, one that made his whole body go rigid. "What is it, boy?" Ethan whispered. Ranger let out a soft, sharp bark, recognition and warning all tangled together. Ethan's pulse spiked. He signaled Grace to stay low and moved toward the back entrance. Suddenly, a metallic glint caught Grace's eye. She motioned Ethan over. Just beneath a pile of rotted hymnals, half buried, was a badge, Detective Olivia Hayes's. Ethan's breath caught in his throat as he brushed away the dirt, revealing a blood-stained wallet and a slip of paper folded into a tiny square. Grace carefully opened it. It was filled with numbers and symbols, some kind of code. "She left this for someone to find," Grace murmured, her hands trembling. Ethan scanned the shadows. "We have to get out of here before they notice us." Before they could move, one of the men inside barked an order. The others started toward the back room. Ranger tensed, ready to defend, but Ethan held him back, retreating toward a side corridor lined with broken confessionals. Huddled in the dark, they listened as the men swept through the pews, flashlights glancing off old wood and stone. One muttered, "She was here. We can't leave any more traces." The other answered, "We'll torch it tomorrow. Make sure it looks like an accident." Ethan pressed his back to the wall, heart hammering. He glanced at Grace, her eyes wide with fear, and mouthed, "Now." They slipped out the side door, Ranger leading the way, paws silent on the overgrown grass. Back at the car, Ethan barely had time to catch his breath before a fourth figure stepped into the light. Gun drawn. Officer Quinn, a cop Ethan had never trusted. "Well, well," Quinn sneered. "Snooping where you don't belong, Carter?" Ethan kept his voice even. Just following up on an old case. You know how it is. Quinn's eyes flicked to Grace and then to Ranger, who bared his teeth. You two need to leave this alone. Last warning. Before Ethan could answer, Ranger lunged, barking fiercely. Quinn stepped back, startled, giving Ethan the moment he needed to usher Grace and Ranger into the car. They sped off, hearts racing, headlights slicing through the darkness. In the safety of Grace's kitchen, they spread their findings across the table. Olivia's badge, the coded note, a set of surveillance photos showing police officers entering and leaving the church at all hours. One, unmistakably, was Chief Leary himself. Ethan's hands shook as he looked at the photos. He's in this up to his neck. Grace nodded, her face drawn. This goes way deeper than we thought. Ranger, still bristling, whined and rested his head on Ethan's lap. Ethan stroked the dog's fur, his resolve hardening. The sense of isolation was crushing, but the truth was finally beginning to surface. He turned to Grace, voice low and fierce. We're not alone. Not anymore. We're going to see this through. All of it. The church at the edge of town was no longer just a piece of Olivia's past. It was the front line of a war Ethan never wanted, but one he couldn't walk away from. As dawn crept over Maple Glen, Ethan stared out into the pale light, knowing the next move could cost him everything. But if there was even a chance to save Olivia, he would risk it all. Sleep was impossible that night. Ethan lay on the living room couch, one arm draped protectively over Ranger, the other gripping his phone like a lifeline. His heart pounded with a mixture of fear and resolve. Every creak of the old house made him tense. Grace had fallen asleep in the guest room, but Ethan knew nobody in this house would truly rest until Olivia was found, and until the truth behind the trafficking ring came to light. At dawn, Ethan's phone buzzed, jolting him upright. A single message from an unknown number. You're in over your head. Walk away or you'll both get burned. Ethan's stomach clenched. He deleted the message, then set his phone face down. There would be no more warnings. Just consequences. He fed Ranger and poured a cup of coffee, hands shaking as he replayed every moment at the church the night before. He could still see Quinn's sneer, the terror in Grace's eyes, the glint of Olivia's badge in the flashlight's beam. He needed a plan, and he needed it fast. By mid-morning, the pressure found them. Chief Leary showed up at Ethan's door, his uniform crisp, his eyes cold. He didn't bother with pleasantries. Carter, Leary growled, pushing past Ethan into the living room. You're off this case. Effective immediately. Turn in your badge and weapon by noon. Ethan kept his expression neutral, but inside, his blood boiled. With respect, Chief, I'm not giving up on Olivia or Ranger. Leary's jaw tightened. You're making enemies, son. Big ones. If you care about that dog or Dr. Holloway, you'll drop this, or you won't like what happens next. Ethan's hands curled into fists. Ranger growled low, stepping protectively between the two men. Leary stared at the dog with thinly veiled disgust, then stormed out, slamming the door so hard the pictures rattled on the wall. Grace appeared in the hallway, hair tangled, eyes wide. That was Leary, wasn't it? Ethan nodded, rubbing his forehead. He just tried to shut me down, threatened us both. She swallowed hard. We need to be careful. He's desperate. Ethan made up his mind right there. They would stay together, somewhere nobody would find them. He packed a duffel bag, cash, old cell phones, Olivia's badge, the coded note, and the photos from the church. Grace stuffed her laptop and medical kit in a tote, grabbing extra dog food for Ranger. Every move felt loaded with urgency. As dusk crept in, Ethan's nerves jangled with anticipation. He barricaded the doors, double-checked the locks, and kept a kitchen knife tucked in his waistband, just in case. Grace worked at the table, decrypting the coded note Olivia had left behind. Ranger paced, ears cocked, his senses tuned to every sound outside. The first sign of trouble came just after midnight, a metallic clatter at the back door. Ethan's breath hitched. He motioned Grace to silence and drew his gun, his heart hammering in his chest. Ranger bristled, teeth bared, ready for anything. Shadows danced across the kitchen window. A gloved hand smashed through the glass, fumbling for the latch. Ethan lunged, slamming the intruder's arm in the frame. Ranger barked, a deep, ferocious sound that filled the house. The masked man outside snarled and pulled back, retreating as two more figures darted across the yard. Grace ducked behind the kitchen island, clutching her laptop and whispering to herself. Ethan fired a warning shot into the air, the sharp retort echoing down the empty street. The men scattered, disappearing into the night. Breathing hard, Ethan locked eyes with Grace. "Pack up, now! We can't stay here." They piled into Ethan's car, Grace in the passenger seat, Ranger wedged between them, still trembling with adrenaline. They drove for miles, winding through back roads and deserted industrial parks until they reached Grace's friend's cabin at the edge of town. It was a shabby little place, but it was safe. At least for now. Inside, Grace pulled up the decrypted code on her laptop. "Its coordinates," she whispered, eyes wide with realization. "A location and a time. Olivia must have planned a drop or a meeting there, the night she disappeared." Ethan ran a hand over his face, exhausted but relieved. "Where is it?" She turned the screen toward him. "It's the old warehouse by the river, the one that burned down last spring, or at least that's what the paperwork said." Ethan's thoughts raced. What if that's where Olivia was taken, or where they're hiding evidence? Ranger whined softly, pressing his nose to Ethan's hand. Ethan squeezed his eyes shut, feeling the weight of failure and hope in equal measure. Grace placed a hand on his shoulder. "We can do this. We have to." He looked at her, his voice hoarse. "We need backup, but we can't trust anyone local, not with Leary and Quinn involved." She nodded. "I know someone, FBI, Animal Crimes Task Force. We did a seminar together last year. I'll call her, but we have to be careful. No names, just enough to get her interested." The night wore on, the three of them huddled together in the flickering lamplight. Ethan stared at Olivia's badge, remembering her smile, her stubborn courage, and her trust in him. He'd let too many people down in his life. His brother, his old partner. He couldn't let it happen again. Ranger crawled closer, resting his head in Ethan's lap. The steady weight of the dog was grounding, a living reminder of loyalty and second chances. Exhausted, Ethan whispered to the dog, "We're almost there, buddy. I promise. I'm not giving up on you or her." Ranger thumped his tail, eyes bright in the dim light. For the first time in days, hope flickered in Ethan's chest. A hope forged in danger, sharpened by loss, and held together by the unwavering loyalty of the only witness who could tell the truth. The old Riverside warehouse had a reputation in Maple Glen. It was supposed to have burned down the previous spring, a convenient insurance claim for its shady owners, and a dead end for more than one investigation. But as Ethan parked his car behind a row of battered dumpsters, it was clear that the building was still very much in use. Floodlights glowed behind the broken windows, and the low thrum of a generator buzzed through the night air. In the back seat, Ranger's body was taut with anticipation. His ears flicked forward, nose pressed to the gap in the window. Grace was pale and silent, clutching her phone, waiting for their new ally, Special Agent Mia Turner of the FBI, to arrive. Ethan glanced at the clock. Turner was due any minute, but already he could feel his nerves starting to fray. Every shadow looked like an enemy, every sound a threat. "You ready?" Grace whispered, her eyes meeting Ethan's in the dim light. He nodded, forcing himself to project a calm he didn't really feel. "We go in fast, we follow Ranger's lead, and we don't take any chances," he said. "We're not here to play heroes. We're here to get Olivia out and end this for good." Headlights flashed in the lot. A black SUV rolled to a stop behind them. Agent Turner stepped out, tall and athletic, her gaze sharp as she approached the car. "You Carter?" she asked, voice low. Ethan nodded. "Good. You said you've got evidence and a witness?" He gestured to Ranger, who growled softly at the stranger before settling. Turner studied the dog, then Ethan. "I trust animals more than most cops these days. If your story checks out, I've got a TAC team 5 minutes away. But we need proof. Let's move." The four slipped through the shadows, sticking close to the riverbank until they reached a rusted side door. Inside, voices echoed. Rough laughter, barked orders, the scuff of boots on concrete. Ranger's hackles rose. He tugged at the leash, nostrils flaring. Turner drew her weapon. "I'll go left. Carter, you and Grace check the office, watch each other's backs." She melted into the darkness, silent as a ghost. Ethan, Grace, and Ranger moved down a corridor littered with trash and broken pallets. At the far end, light leaked from under a battered metal door. Ranger's body tensed, then lunged forward with a single urgent bark. Inside, chaos erupted. A guard, masked, armed, lunged for Ethan, who ducked low and tackled the man into a stack of crates. Grace screamed as another thug grabbed her arm. Ranger broke free, teeth flashing, and clamped onto the attacker's leg. The man howled and stumbled, dropping his weapon as Ranger forced him to the ground. Gunshots rang out from the main floor, the sharp pop of Turner's service pistol answering the thug's fire. Ethan wrestled his attacker's gun away and cuffed the man with plastic ties, heart hammering in his chest. "Grace, are you okay?" he called, voice raw. She nodded, scrambling to her feet as Ranger herded the second thug away from her, snarling with protective fury. From the back of the office came a muffled shout. Ethan spun, adrenaline surging. "That's Olivia!" He ran to the door, but it was locked tight with a heavy chain. On the other side, a woman's voice called out, weak but determined. "Ethan! Is that you?" "Olivia, hold on!" Ethan jammed his shoulder against the door. It didn't budge. Ranger barked and scratched at the bottom, frantic. Grace darted to the guard's belt and grabbed a ring of keys, tossing them to Ethan. With shaking hands, he fumbled through the keys until one finally slid home. The lock snapped open. He burst into the cramped office, the air thick with dust and the smell of blood. Olivia Hayes slumped in a battered chair, wrists bound, face pale and bruised, but alive. Tears sprang to Ethan's eyes as he knelt beside her, cutting her free. "Thought you'd never get here," Olivia croaked, a tired grin splitting her cracked lips. "Wasn't about to let you down," Ethan choked out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Ranger pressed his nose to Olivia's hands, whining and licking her fingers. She laughed, sobbing, and pulled the dog into a trembling hug. Grace appeared in the doorway, eyes wide with relief. "We need to move." "Leary and his men." A crash from the main floor interrupted her. Turner's voice, amplified by a megaphone, thundered through the warehouse. "Federal agents! You're surrounded! Drop your weapons and surrender!" For a moment, everything was chaos. Men shouting, feet pounding on the concrete. Ethan slung Olivia's arm over his shoulders, supporting her as they limped down the hall with Grace and Ranger leading the way. Turner's TAC team burst through the front, flashbangs detonating in blinding bursts of light. They cleared the warehouse in minutes. Leary, nowhere to be seen, had vanished in the confusion, but several officers in uniform were arrested on the spot, including Officer Quinn. Turner strode over, grim satisfaction on her face. "You did good, Carter," she said quietly, eyes on Olivia and Ranger. "But this isn't over. Leary's running. We'll find him. You just saved a lot of lives tonight." Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of everything he'd carried start to lift, if only a little. Olivia gripped his hand, Ranger nuzzling her side. For the first time in weeks, hope shimmered at the edge of exhaustion and pain. They'd survived the showdown, but as the flashing lights of justice danced across the river, Ethan knew the fight for truth, and for redemption, was only just beginning. The first rays of sunlight crept over the river, staining the sky with streaks of orange and gold, as if the world itself was waking from a nightmare. The warehouse, once the center of so much darkness, now buzzed with the energy of law enforcement and emergency crews. Red and blue lights pulsed across the parking lot. Officers, some still in shock, some quietly furious, moved in and out, taking statements, collecting evidence, and processing the arrested suspects. The truth, after so many months buried in lies and shadows, was finally out in the open. Ethan stood outside a battered ambulance, jacket wrapped around Olivia's shoulders. She sat on the tailgate, shivering despite the warmth, one hand gripping Ranger's fur as if the dog's steady presence was the only thing keeping her from unraveling. Grace leaned against the fender nearby, dark circles under her eyes but a quiet pride in her stance. Turner's FBI team coordinated with the state police, keeping a wary watch for any sign of Chief Leary or the last of his loyalists. Olivia's voice was raw but steady. "I kept thinking if I could just hold on, you'd find me. I didn't think I'd see the sun again." Ethan squeezed her hand. "You're tougher than anyone I know." He looked at Ranger, whose tail thumped weakly against the metal bumper. "And you have the best partner in the world." Grace checked Olivia's vitals and pressed a bottle of water into her hand. "You're safe now. The worst is over. Let's get you to the hospital, Olivia. They'll want to make sure you're really okay." Olivia nodded, tears brimming. "Thank you, Grace. For everything." Ranger barked softly and nudged Olivia's knee. She managed a tired laugh, hugging him close, face buried in his thick fur. For a moment, Ethan saw the Olivia he remembered, bright, stubborn, unbreakable. As the sun rose higher, the weight of what had happened began to settle over the town. News vans rolled in, reporters desperate for details. Rumors of corruption and the trafficking ring spread like wildfire. For years, Maple Glen had trusted its police force. Now they had to face the truth that the rot went all the way to the top. Ethan watched Turner's team haul evidence from the warehouse. Boxes of ledgers, burner phones, bags of cash, and files filled with names, dates, and dirty secrets. Officer Quinn and 2 others sat in cuffs, heads bowed, the shame heavy in the morning light. Chief Leary was still missing, but the dragnet was tightening. His photo flashed on every screen, a public symbol of the betrayal. For Ethan, the aftermath was a blur. He answered questions, gave statements, and tried not to let the guilt eat away at him. He caught glimpses of townsfolk in the growing crowd, faces etched with shock, fear, and in a few cases, relief. Kids pointed at Ranger, whispering about the hero dog who'd saved the day. In the middle of it all, Ethan pulled Olivia and Grace aside. "When this settles, we'll need to testify. This won't be easy. Leary still has friends. Some people won't want the truth to come out." Olivia's jaw tightened, but she nodded. "I'm not afraid of the truth. Not anymore." Grace took their hands, grounding them. "We stick together. That's how we got this far." They sat together on the riverbank, silence settling between them. Ranger curled at their feet, content for the first time in weeks. In the quiet, Ethan let himself feel it. A rare, gentle peace. They had survived the night. They had brought the truth into the daylight. As the last officers packed up, a few local families gathered near the yellow tape. A boy with sandy hair approached, holding a sketchbook and a shy smile. "Is that Ranger?" he asked Ethan. Ethan nodded. "Yeah, that's him. He's been through a lot." The boy knelt, showing Ranger his sketch, a heroic drawing of the German Shepherd standing tall in front of the burning warehouse. Ranger sniffed the page, tail wagging. The boy grinned. "My dad said heroes come in all shapes. I think dogs are the best kind." Ethan felt a lump in his throat. "I agree, kid. I really do." In that moment, the exhaustion and anger faded. For the first time, Ethan didn't feel alone. He felt part of something bigger, a community, broken but healing, waking up to the truth and promising to do better. Turner walked over, extending her hand. "We'll keep you updated. Leary can't hide forever. But for now, you did good, Carter. All of you." Ethan shook her hand, then watched as the FBI team rolled out, leaving the riverbank to the morning. The sky was bright now, golden light glinting off the water. Olivia, still leaning on Ethan, smiled at Grace. "I forgot how beautiful sunrise could be." Grace nodded. "It's even better when you have people to share it with." Ranger stretched, yawned, and settled his head in Olivia's lap. Ethan watched the three of them, feeling, at last, a sense of closure, however fragile. The journey wasn't over, not by a long shot. There would be questions and pain and reckoning ahead. But in this fragile dawn, justice had finally come to Maple Glen. Ethan closed his eyes, listening to the river, the distant birds, and the quiet breathing of his friends. He knew there would be scars, but there would also be hope, piece by piece, sunrise by sunrise. The days that followed the warehouse rescue blurred together in a haze of interviews, paperwork, and anxious waiting. Maple Glen was in shock. Every radio and TV crackled with news of the town's hidden darkness. Police corruption, the trafficking ring, the missing chief. The sense of betrayal cut deep, but for the first time in a long while, people talked openly, asking hard questions. No one in Maple Glen could pretend life would ever go back to normal. Ethan moved through it all as if underwater. The adrenaline had faded, replaced by exhaustion and a gnawing uncertainty. But amid the chaos, he clung to his routines. Morning coffee, slow walks with Ranger, late-night calls with Grace and Olivia. The three survivors were bound together by something stronger than trauma, by a sense of hard-won trust and the realization that justice had a cost, but so did silence. One morning, Ethan clipped the leash onto Ranger's collar and stepped out into the thin autumn sunlight. The air was sharp and clean, a world away from the heavy smoke and fear of a week ago. Together, they walked through the heart of Maple Glen, passing boarded-up storefronts and freshly painted murals. People nodded, some with gratitude, others with wariness. Ethan felt their eyes following him, not as an officer, but as someone who had helped drag the truth into the light. Ranger, bandaged but healing, walked with his head high. Children pointed and waved. A few ran up to pet him, their laughter echoing in the quiet streets. "That's the hero dog," one girl exclaimed, showing Ethan a patch her mother had sewn onto her backpack, a German shepherd in silhouette standing guard. For the first time, Ethan realized that Ranger wasn't just a survivor. He was a symbol, a reminder that loyalty, even when tested, could help a town find its way again. They paused at the park, where the leaves drifted in golden piles and families gathered in cautious hope. Ethan sat on a bench, watching Ranger sniff the air and wag at a pair of toddlers. As he watched, something inside him loosened, the knot of guilt and anger he'd carried for so long. He pulled out his old leather notebook, the one he used to carry on patrols, and started to write. Not an official report, just thoughts, questions, and confessions he'd never spoken aloud. "What is loyalty, really?" he wrote. "Is it blind obedience? Is it standing by someone even when you're afraid? Or is it risking everything to do what's right, even when you stand alone?" Ethan thought of his brother, lost to a fire years ago, and of Olivia, nearly lost to the flames of human cruelty. He thought of Ranger, battered but refusing to give up, even as the world fell apart around him. The questions churned as he watched the town rebuild itself. More officers walked the streets now, their uniforms clean, their faces new. People greeted them with cautious respect. At the school across the street, teachers led kids in fire drills, practicing what to do when the world gets dangerous. In the distance, Ethan heard church bells, once a symbol of secrets, now a call to community. He thought of Grace, who had started a therapy program for officers and children, using animals to teach healing, trust, and courage. Ranger, now officially retired, visited the department twice a week, sitting quietly as children read to him, or standing by as officers struggled through their own trauma. The dog had become more than a witness. He was a healer, a bridge between the wounds of the past and the promise of the future. That afternoon, Ethan walked with Olivia down to the riverbank. The scars on her face were fading, but the ones inside would take longer. They talked quietly, sharing memories and regrets, their voices low beneath the whisper of the water. "I keep thinking about everything we lost," Olivia said, tossing a stone into the current. "But then I look around, and I see what we still have. Each other. This community. Even after everything, there's still hope." Ethan nodded, emotion tightening his throat. "I spent so long blaming myself, for my brother, for letting the department rot, for almost losing you. But Ranger, he taught me something. Healing doesn't mean forgetting pain. It means carrying it together, piece by piece." They sat in silence, letting the river wash away some of the weight. Ethan pulled out his notebook and read aloud what he'd written. Olivia listened, tears in her eyes, then hugged him tight. "You didn't let anyone down, Ethan. You kept fighting when it mattered most." That night, Ethan visited his brother's grave for the first time in years. He stood beneath the old oak tree, Ranger at his side, and let the memories come. He apologized for the mistakes he'd made, for being too proud to ask for help, for carrying so much alone. He promised to do better, to live the kind of life that honored both the pain and the healing. Maple Glen wasn't healed, not completely. There were still wounds, still questions, still days when the darkness felt too close. but there were signs of change. Families holding each other tighter, neighbors checking in, kids running to pet a gentle, aging K9 who had seen the worst and still chose hope. One afternoon, Ethan and Grace hosted a small gathering in the park. Officers, families, and children gathered to celebrate the survivors and to remember those lost. Ranger sat quietly as each person shared a memory, a lesson, a hope for the future. When Ethan knelt beside Ranger, a hush fell over the crowd. He spoke from the heart, sharing the lesson he'd learned the hard way. Loyalty isn't just following orders. It's having the courage to stand up for the vulnerable, to fight for what's right, even when you're scared. And healing. Healing comes from community, from letting others help carry your pain. Justice demands vigilance from all of us, every day. And hope. It's built one moment, one act of kindness at a time. As the sun set, Ethan felt, for the first time in years, a deep and genuine sense of peace. Surrounded by friends, by family, by the quiet strength of a loyal dog, he knew they could face whatever came next. Together. A year had passed since the fire at the warehouse, yet Maple Glen still bore the scars and the new growth of what had happened that autumn. Change was everywhere, in the faces of new recruits at the police station, in the laughter of children running free at the annual summer picnic, in the gentle hush that fell when someone spoke Ranger's name. Ethan Carter walked along Main Street, sunlight glinting off storefront windows. Gone was the heaviness that had weighed on him for so long. There were still hard days, moments when memories crashed in like waves, but he felt grounded now, anchored by the family and community that had grown out of the struggle. Outside the newly renovated police station, a brass plaque caught his eye. It read, "In honor of those who risked everything for justice, let loyalty and courage be our guide." Flowers and hand-drawn cards were piled beneath it, some from adults, others scrawled in childish handwriting, many with sketches of a German shepherd. Ranger's story had spread far beyond Maple Glen, inspiring towns across the state to invest in K9 units, animal welfare, and officer wellness programs. People who had never set foot in Ohio sent letters, donations, and, occasionally, a hand-sewn dog toy or box of treats. Today was a special day. The department had organized a public event to celebrate the new era, one of transparency, community trust, and hard-won healing. Grace bustled around the courtyard, overseeing the animal therapy demonstration she'd pioneered, while Olivia, now promoted to lieutenant, stood by the steps, fielding questions from local kids and offering advice to young women who dreamed of joining the force. The sky was impossibly blue, the air sweet with the scent of lemonade and cut grass. Ethan found Ranger resting in the shade of a big oak tree, a red bandana tied around his neck and a medal shining at his collar. The dog looked older, his muzzle peppered with gray, his gait slower, but his eyes still held that unbreakable spark. Children gathered around, hands gentle, voices awed. "He's the bravest dog ever," one little boy whispered, and Ranger, ever the professional, sat patiently while a girl wrapped her arms around him. Ethan crouched beside his old friend, scratching behind his ears. "You ready for the spotlight again?" he teased. Ranger nudged his hand, tail wagging. Olivia approached, her uniform crisp, a rare smile softening her features. "You know, the mayor's been asking if Ranger's available for an interview," she joked, and Ethan laughed, the sound warm and free. The ceremony was simple, but moving. The mayor spoke of courage, transparency, and the power of community. Grace shared stories of the children and officers whose lives had been changed by the animal therapy program. Olivia, Never one for speeches, just thanked everyone for believing in second chances. When Ethan took the mic, he glanced down at Ranger and felt a rush of emotion. "A year ago, this town was in darkness," he began, voice steady. "But together, we found the light. We fought for truth, for each other, and for the kind of justice that doesn't end when the case closes. The world will never be perfect, but we choose every day to make it better, to show up, to care, and to trust again. That's what Ranger taught me, and that's what I hope we'll keep doing, together." The crowd erupted in applause. Ethan blinked back tears, feeling the warmth and belonging he'd chased for so long finally settle in his bones. After the ceremony, families lingered in the park, sharing stories and hopes for the future. Ethan's father, once distant and bitter, pulled him aside, voice rough with emotion. "I'm proud of you, son. I know I haven't said that enough." Ethan hugged him tight, old wounds finally beginning to heal. Later, as dusk painted the sky in lavender and rose, Ethan, Olivia, Grace, and Ranger sat together on the grass. Children chased fireflies. Couples shared quiet conversations. The world felt gentle, safe. Olivia leaned back, face relaxed in a way Ethan hadn't seen since before she disappeared. "I keep thinking about what comes next," she said. "What it means to move forward, not just as a cop, but as a person." Grace nodded, eyes on the children. "It means not letting pain close us off. It means remembering that strength is letting others help, not just fighting alone." Ethan sipped his lemonade, the tartness grounding him in the moment. "It means forgiveness, too, for others, for ourselves, and it means building something better from the ashes, not erasing what happened, but letting it shape us into people who care more, love harder, and stand up for those who can't." Ranger rested his head on Ethan's knee, content and at peace. The dog had found a new purpose, no longer just a partner or a hero, but a friend, a healer, and a living symbol of hope. When children were afraid, he let them read stories into his soft fur. When officers felt the weight of the world, he sat by their side, a reminder that it was okay to lean on someone else. Across the region, towns took notice. Grants funded new K-9 programs and therapy dog initiatives. Officers were required to take wellness training and to build real connections with the communities they served. Some days were hard. Corruption and apathy didn't disappear overnight. But the lesson of Maple Glen spread farther than any could have imagined. That courage, loyalty, and compassion are contagious. That true justice is a choice, made every day in 1,000 quiet ways. As the stars emerged, Ethan felt a deep sense of peace. He remembered the fire, the fear, the moments he'd nearly given up. He remembered the people lost, the wounds carried, and the nights spent walking through darkness. But he also remembered every act of kindness, every hand offered, every truth spoken, every promise kept. He looked around at his friends, at Ranger sleeping soundly, at the children whose laughter echoed through the summer night. In that moment, Ethan understood. The light doesn't erase the scars, it shines because of them. And as the town gathered under the soft glow of lanterns and fireflies, Ethan knew that whatever the future brought, they would face it together, stronger, braver, and more whole than before.